Hello and welcome to part two of our Dragos and SideChannel partner series, Ransomware and Manufacturing. As Jacob said, my name is Bernardino Barata. I'm the Vice President of Projects and Engineering here at MXD, and I'll be moderating today's discussion and Q&A. If you've been following the news, this past Monday, the U.S. Justice Department charged 6 Russian intelligence officers with hacking. They allegedly orchestrated multiple international attacks, including the 2017 NotPetya ransomware attack, which is believed to have caused over $10 billion of business losses worldwide, including $870 million in losses by Merck Pharmaceutical and $400 million to FedEx's European operations. These are large companies, but being a small company doesn't protect you. A 2020 Sophos report noted that small companies are just as likely to be attacked as larger ones. The same report found that the average cost of dealing with a ransomware attack where you don't pay the ransom was $730,000. But if you did pay the ransom, your costs increased to $1.4 million. So paying the ransom is not the easy way out. It's actually more painful in the long run. In keeping with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we've gathered experts in the field of cyber risk to discuss this topic and the importance of knowing your systems, lessons from recent ransomware attacks, and much more. Joining us today is Jason Christopher, Principal Cyber Risk Advisor at Dragos. With over 15 years of experience in industrial control systems, risk management, and regulatory knowledge, Jason has held various roles across the U.S. Department of Energy, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, where he led programs across the NIST cybersecurity framework and the Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model, or CCM, or C2M2. Also joining us today is Brian Haugli, Managing Partner and Co-Founder of SideChannel. Brian has been driving security programs for 2 decades and is a renowned speaker and expert on NIST guidance, threat intelligence implementations, and strategic organizational initiatives. Before we hear from Brian and Jason, we'd like to hear from you through a quick poll. First question is, how familiar are you with ransomware in industrial systems? While you start responding to this poll, Brian, I'd like to hand it over to you to start presenting our materials. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernardino. Always great to be involved with MXD and get out to the membership and who you are all working with. Very much enjoyed the first in this series and looking forward to the second one to work with Jason on and talk with all of you. So I think by getting a good understanding of where everyone is as far as familiarity go, I think it'll help Jason and I really steer the level of the conversation that we want to have. So if you can select that now, we can get a better understanding of our audience comfort level with ransomware in industrial systems. And look, if you don't know, it's okay. Click unaware, new to security. It's fine. I think we're going to cover some good topics. Overall, why does this matter to small, mid-sized manufacturers? I would go so far as to say, in working with clients and just any other talks and advising, it matters because of the fact that you are small and you are supporting most definitely some larger client. You are in the supply chain, and the news will definitely give you a bit of a shock as to what's happening to the supply chain. But if you really focus in on it, and if you're within the defense industrial base particularly, you're going to notice, or if you haven't seen yet, a predominant shift and real focus by the US government, by the DoD, by Congress, at looking at the supply chain that supports our Defense Department and our defense capabilities as a nation. So while you may not necessarily believe that, or you believe that you're too small for it to be impactful, others who are upstream from you, who are depending on you, do believe that your cybersecurity is important. And I think what we're going to see, and I'm of the opinion, and it'll be kind of the component of the narrative that I'll talk about, is that is what's going to drive down to probably make most small and mid-sized organizations realize that cyber is an issue. It's no longer just this IT component. It's no longer just somebody else's piece. It's no longer I'm too small. That just happens to larger groups that are in the news. It's going to be at your front doorstep, either in contracts or by some type of revenue generation from a client or a key client, or eventually regulators, right? And then you'll just have to manage the legal and the regulatory compliance with adhering to a cybersecurity posture. So let's look at the poll here. It looks like we're tied. So people are either at least somewhat familiar. They've read some disturbing news, or they keep up. So 40-ish, 80% of our group, and just a few of you are a little unfamiliar. So that's fine. It's good to know. We
Awesome.
won't go too in deep, and we'll keep that in mind. But this is good. This is going to be a good audience, I think, Jason.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. That's good to see that so many people are aware of it, right? And I think to your point too, if you're sort of on the nation side, just sort of starting to get into it, it's coming front and center. No matter where you are in this right now, it's really the new thing that we're all really kind of thrust into from the industrial space too.
Yeah. So let's, so I guess that's kind of my position, I guess, on why this matters, right? And now we know people, their familiarity. So, Jason, what's your view? Like, you're a little deep, you're deeper into and closer to the ICS space, right? As far as technical, like shop floors, manufacturing itself, and like those implementations. I'm mostly been working with folks more on the risk assessment side, kind of organizational enterprise views of what this risk can mean. You're a little bit more integrated in your role at Dragos and kind of who you're working with the customers. Why should an operations manager, or like why should the shop floor or those responsible for manufacturing and those components, why should they view or be a voice of cyber's an issue that we need to address, like bringing it up to leadership? What's your opinion?
I think what's interesting about ransomware is when we talk about it from the industrial space, we're not necessarily talking about attackers who are looking at your manufacturing facility and targeting you specifically, right? It is something that is giving a much more broad stroke. So there's something that's more of a shotgun effect, seeing what they can just sort of get out there. And all of a sudden, these industrial firms that typically haven't had to worry about cybersecurity, at least from where they're sitting, right? Depending on where you're at. If you're in operations, you're focused on operations, right? You're focusing on being able to maintain a product. You're focusing on maintaining safety, maybe. But maybe cybersecurity is not part of that conversation, but ransomware sort of forces it because it could have these unintended consequences where next thing you know, you're having the worst day imaginable for you. So all of a sudden you're going from, I'm maintaining a product, I'm maintaining safe systems, to I can't maintain this product anymore because my systems are down, or I'm operating in an unsafe state, and I may or may not know that. And all this sort of reliance and what we've done in terms of changing things to go into digital transformation and becoming more digitized throughout our processes has really forced that operator, those engineers, to adapt as part of that, to make cybersecurity part of the conversation, just as we have with safety over the past few decades too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like upstream, I think within an organization, maybe the traditional front office or small enterprises and their reliance on IT, their expansion and use of IT within an organization, ransomware's impact on that, not on the floor, is just as important, right? I mean, you're going to start looking at, if a small or mid-sized organization's accounting capabilities or financial transaction capabilities, or even be able to write contracts and do sales, it suddenly gets impacted by a ransomware event or anything that's going to, really affect availability. Well, now the front end and the corporate or the business itself is now going to, be in a position where they're going to fail to provide quickly the services that they should to their employees. So not only on the manufacturing floor do you run the risk of, impacting revenue and product generation and the safety aspects, but now the company itself has, and significantly could, impact its ability to just provide for its own staff, its employees. Like, can a company, if it's impacted by ransomware, could any of the audience think about it today? If you had to, on a dime, be able to start writing paper checks to continue to pay your employees so they could feed their families and pay their mortgages, is that something that you could do today, tomorrow? Could you do it quickly? And what are you doing so that to prepare your organization or bolster your cyber defenses so that that's not a scenario you have to walk through? I think that's a really easy kind of gauge for, I would say, most organizations to go through, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, talk about, what about healthcare benefits for folks? What about doing communications and marketing? How does your sales process get impacted? How do you go get new business? So the impact of ransomware, I think, is twofold between what you've said and I think the enterprise to manufacturing, whereas organizations, corporate entities that don't have manufacturing, it's still a risk, but I mean, you've got kind of two major areas to have to worry about and start addressing.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you hit on too, just from that, how bad could this nightmare scenario be, and like, what do I have to do to respond to it? If you had to go and replace every single computer at your organization,
Sure.
are you going to Best Buy, to Walmart? Are you just saying just load it all up, and then you get back to the office, and do you have a last known good image or data set that you can start repairing what you did for HR, for payroll on the IT side? But then the industrial process also, right? So do you have the SCADA set points or the DCS set points? So you can actually go through your control system and say, yes, this is absolutely where my PLCs and RTUs should be maintaining their ladder logic and all the other cool things that I have to do to maintain a safe process. Or is that on a paper bin somewhere? Is that project files that a contractor has somewhere else, maybe not even in the same state as your operations? Are you calling them to bring them on site all of a sudden? There's a lot for that sort of bad day scenario of, I don't have computers now. I can't, to your point, processing check, but now how do I email somebody to say, hey, I need you to come on site? Are you sending them from your Gmail on your phone now? Like, what does all that look like is a real sort of nightmare scenario to try to unpack to be prepared for ransomware.
Right. And it's a big push that I have with people and talk on is incident response and management, because, unfortunately, is the best that we can do to protect ourselves. Unfortunately, a bad day can happen anyway. And what we can do is just best be prepared for it. So if that is going to happen, are you prepared? If you have written an incident response plan and you've thought about this scenario unfolding, have you practiced what you would do? Or is the first time you plan on going through it when it actually happens? And if that's the case, you're going to have a really, really hard time cleanly getting through that scenario should it all unfold. It's an interesting space. I think preparation is key, not just from like making sure you have the right protection in place, but also preparing for the worst should it happen. What do you do? Like you said, can your leadership intuitively and just say, hey, this is our process. We are going to default to personal Gmail, and by the way, employees, you should expect that this is coming from them, right? Because we've trained everyone to almost be completely suspicious, right? Suspicious of everything. So employees are now seeing something that's masquerading as their company. Are they going to just delete it? And that was how they were supposed to continue to get their paycheck. And then you have to go through that process. So some interesting areas to have to unfold and really address. I don't think the main point is it's no longer something that can be ignored on many different levels.
Right. Sorry, I just cracked up because I was thinking when you're talking about the suspicion, like it literally is the email you're told to delete and ignore. Like the CEO says, I need a purchase order ASAP to get 30,000 computers immediately. Do not go to Treasury, just go straight to me. Like, I need this. Like, you're supposed to kill that thing, right? But again, in ransomware, if you're not trained for it, if you're not ready for what that bad day looks like, one of the phrases I like to use a lot of incident response is you train like it's game day, right? So muscle memory is really what you want to kick in. And if the muscle memory that we've trained everybody to do is the opposite because they're not ready for an incident, it could make it a lot more painful than it needs to be.
Oh, it definitely can. I've seen it. It's very much like you train like you fight. In the military, that's how it rolls out. Same exact idea. I like game day better. That's good. What is our poll here on financial terms? So do you know what a complete technology outage from ransomware or otherwise would look like in financial terms to your organization? So we're not going to vote, but we'd like to see, what you guys and girls are seeing. I can't see the attendees, so apologies, but it looks like we got a good audience. A few thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars per day. I'll give you a hint on whenever I have a discussion about determining impact and importance of assets to an organization, I always tie it back to what are the systems and the capabilities that are tied to the most or the highest revenue generation in your firm. Is it one thing? Fine, maybe that's it. But you know where to focus your protections and your capabilities. Is it multiple things? Great. Let's stack rank them and figure out that we're protecting the thing that makes you $2 million a day over the thing that makes you $2,000 a day. So we'll see some votes come in here. And
Yeah, it's funny because at Dragos, we refer to what you just described as sort of the crown jewel analysis, right? Like, do you know where the crown jewels are? And once you do, you can sort of protect them based off of that.
Right.
We probably should have had it also a selectable answer in here is I don't know. I would consider a few $1,000s, not to sort of tilt the scales for the audience, probably as I don't know, because a few $1,000s for a total outage maybe a little bit on the light side. So if that just changed your vote, I'm sorry, but for the I don't know question, for the 20% that maybe this is the first time you're considering these things, that may be a good I don't know answer. Because to your point, Brian, I think when we think about this from an operations perspective, especially, right? A lot of folks already know what it's like to not have a plant operational for a day. I don't know a CEO who can't give me the dollar value. And so if we start talking about it from that perspective, that does also help you figure out then from a budgeting perspective on cybersecurity. Well, if it's going to be something that is in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars conversation, then maybe we're sort of wiggling out of what we need to do to protect those systems even better.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing how many times I have discussions with folks and they kind of stop at this point where they're like, maybe I can figure that out, but even if I did, how much is this all going to be? What is this going to be? Like, it's almost too onerous for them to like just take on and run with. And I'll tell you, if you just commit time with your senior leadership and the people who really know what an impact can do to an organization, spend a little bit of time, get it down on paper, you can really start visualizing what something like this would mean. And then you can make the right decision around the resources or the budget that you should put towards preventing this or at least reducing the risk. Everyone kind of just jumps into like, oh, I got to spend all this money to, resources to address cybersecurity. It's like, well, I mean, no, you need to spend the right money and the right resources on it. Have you done the exercise to figure out where those should even go first? Not everything needs to get protected at the same level. And I think that's one unfortunate side to our industry that has kind of trained everybody to think that you need to protect everything at an equal level, when the reality is, to your point, the crown jewels are what you definitely want to protect because that's what is the most impactful for you. Therefore, that's where you should put your resources first and then build out from there. You don't have to all do it at once, right? Yep. So yeah, it looks like we've got only a few thousands, but mostly it's going to cost them tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or quarter of our audience. So if I do my math right, that's about 8 people are representing millions of dollars per day in impact. That's huge. Substantial.
That is, and that's really good to sort of frame up as you sort of, I want to segue a little bit into sort of use cases for folks to maybe start thinking about, well, what has this looked like? And some of the examples that I'd like to use for folks may not be traditional ransomware, right? Because while we've seen a lot of ransomware in the sector, I think that some of the conversations also are uniquely identified with what's ransomware versus wipers. Where you may have a malicious adversary out there who just doesn't care about ransom and is just trying to wipe everything out. Well, the thing for you as an asset owner is your response will probably look very similar, right? Because you don't have an operational system, and whether or not you have this little carrot in front of you that says, hey, if you pay me this many Bitcoins, I may unlock this for you. You may have to figure out from that, again, that incident response side, that really bad day, those 6 and 7 figures possibly per day of having an outage. Well, what does that look like? So I'll share my screen for a moment here and sort of walk through some of that to help folks out. So one of the things that has made this sort of, I'd say, more of a prevalent problem to what we're discussing, why weren't we discussing this 20 years ago? Well, 20 years ago, the sort of ICS threats that we were looking at was unintended IT malware finds its way into the system, right? Unintended things like Slammer, that an engineer plugged in the USB when they shouldn't have, they clicked on a thing that they shouldn't have. And we've seen over time that we've allowed that to sort of be more persistent. We've gone from being highly manual to now being highly connected systems in a lot of cases. We're now talking about Industry 4.0, digitalization. All of that is fantastic new things for an organization to figure out how to become more optimized in manufacturing, right? We're now getting more data feeds to the executives. And when you think about just improving a process by a couple of percentage points, that could translate into millions of dollars of profit. And so tacking onto that, oh, by the way, Mr. Executive, you should also be worried about cybersecurity, gets a little bit difficult over time. And a lot of what we focus on at Dragos, for example, and Brian helped me sort of parse between those two, is when we talk about the industrial control system side, I'm not going to be sort of focusing on data breaches, right? While I do care about employee information and customer information, those zeros and ones are the data that we hear a lot about when you think about the exfiltrations of data, how somebody's going to get all your user accounts. But for industrial control systems, I want to think about the zeros and ones being the things that impact the physical world, right? So motors, sensors, controllers, safety systems, things that translate into a physical impact. And maybe this will help visualize that a little bit more. So we have our corporate IT network, right? And so you can see here, I've got the cloud raining down the zeros and ones of all the data and the different interconnections that you may have with different systems, HR, payroll, customer data, things of that nature. And we traditionally think of that as stage one of any sort of incident that may happen on the OT side, where in our plant environment, you will maybe, I do hope that there are these two firewalls in place. I hope that there's some sort of good boundary, because these are the crown jewels, right? These are the things that if they're impacted, you can't operate. You can't actually produce the product that's going to pay the bills. And so in that case there, we have what we would call stage two of what we refer to as the ICS cybersecurity kill chain, where there's more sort of informative discussions that are happening with adversaries here. And any good sort of stage two attack will start with stage one. So there are things you can do in the IT space to sort of help prevent an OT attack. But when we think about an adversary's intentions, they're trying to get into those plant environments if they're really going through and having this conversation about an OT specific attack. So they work together, right? And when we think through that, the impacts are also going to be different. Again, we're not talking about exfiltration of data. So for industrial processes, we're thinking about loss of view, loss of control, or safety, manipulation of our instruments there. Again, when you think about what this ransomware could be for you, think about those industrial impacts at the end of the day. So hopefully that level sets on these impacts that are probably most important. What does the ransomware piece look like? And so this is sort of the case studies that maybe should get the blood flowing, and we could have some good Q&A into this panel to make sure that everyone sort of sees, okay, from a level setting perspective, how has ransomware evolved? Like, why all of a sudden are we talking about this more in industrial space? Well, ransomware itself has changed. In pre-2017, we're really talking about just looking at a single victim, single machine. You accidentally loaded something that you shouldn't have, and now that machine is locked out. Very targeted, using phishing, malicious websites, things of that nature. 2017 to 2018, it was interesting because we started seeing this become wormable, meaning that single victim machine and opportunistic targeting, but it could now spread a little quicker than it was before. So what we're discussing today, and these are the things that I think should really be concerning when we talk about manufacturing. When we think about the sort of interactive operations that they can now have to attack the corporate networks and then hold entire networks hostage now, no longer single machine, single victim, corporations, whole networks. That's something that makes this sort of scope expand beyond what we've seen before. So this is a good interactive map where you can see here, this is WannaCry. This is actually from the New York Times, great map that I like to be able to show folks of just how quickly these things can spread. We're talking about 230 companies here, over 150 countries getting impacted. And you can see it just sort of, it went like wildfire. Now, of course, WannaCry did not impact the US operations as much as it did in Europe. A lot of that had to do with just sort of timing and luck of the draw and when the kill switch was actually activated. To then sort of a use case around NotPetya. And so we heard a little bit about NotPetya this morning. It was not so much about the ransomware piece of it. It was a wiper disguised as ransomware. So we now know from the Department of Justice conversation that happened today about the nation state threats that are part of this conversation. And what's really interesting here is that it impacted a lot of organizations that were just collateral damage to this attack. When you think about all these companies and what does FedEx have to do with Merck, have to do with Mondelez? They all just so happen to file taxes in the same country. And so utilizing a sort of targeted system got a lot of collateral damage for these organizations, leading to over $10 billion in estimated damages. and 2 million computers being impacted in 2 hours. Again, when you think about what your incident response may have to look like, think about trying to replace all of it, seeing everything just sort of go dark within a matter of hours in your organization. And how do you respond? How do you know who you should be calling at that point for that? And I think a lot of people also heard a lot about Norsk Hydro, and this would be sort of my last example to really tie this together, because it gives you an idea of how this sort of looks like from an operator's perspective. At execution, what it did, it actually removed itself and launched a child process to write a ransom note. Very, very polite of it to write that ransom note for you. And then it will go through and encrypt all your files, the different sort of sensitive data you may have in whatever environment it's in. It doesn't care if it's IT or OT. And then it will change the local user and admin credentials. Then it locks you out. It will disable your system network card. So now I can't access it off my network to sort of do any sort of root recovery. And it'll then log off all those users. Since it's changed your credentials, you can no longer go back into those systems. So again, think about how sort of catastrophic this could be from your own perspective. Knowing again that when we think through this, it's that stage 1 to that stage 2 piece, where OT for all of those examples was collateral damage. They weren't focusing on OT. It was just that the right boundaries or protections weren't in place for those crown jewels that Brian had just mentioned a little bit earlier. And so hopefully it helps sort of frame this within the examples and context of a lot of what we're discussing today. It does come down to what this means from an OT perspective, most likely in manufacturing, but noticing that it'll also impact your IT infrastructure as well. And so I think we had one last question that we could sort of post up here for the audience to sort of talk through sort of what things they're looking at as well.
Right. What protections do you have for ransomware? Right. What are you doing? Right? Robust backups, OT specific incident response, monitoring, strong IT OT boundaries. If you don't know, what's interesting here, your second example, I think, is not Petya, Jason. And what happens, and probably why smaller mid-market companies or manufacturers need to be aware is, are you in a position where an opportunistic attack that's not targeted at you could impact you? I think that's a bigger question than I think most organizations who are not enterprise level or even enterprise level need to ask themselves. Am I constantly just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or am I trying to create my environment so that it is never in the wrong place or in the wrong time? Or if it is, it's at the minimal amount. I mean, you talk about who got impacted by NotPetya. It was because they were all filing taxes through a service provider, right, in another country. But then downstream, other people got impacted because they were attached to those companies. So are you looking at who you're doing business with and interconnected with? That could be, you could literally be impacted because it's opportunistic of the malware, right? And not even targeted. So the collateral damage piece goes beyond it. You're dead right about the collateral damage of OT being collateral damage of IT being impacted. But a company itself could be collaterally damaged because of just who they're doing business with, who's relying on them, who has access to whomever, how they're doing data sharing, access sharing, whatever it is. Are people looking at that? Or is it just like, oh, they're bigger, they've got it under control, I don't have to worry about it? It's like, well, don't assume too much, Yeah,
that's interesting because it requires you to sort of take a look at where you are in the supply chain, right? So the supply chain, I think what a lot of folks focus on a bit too much is that there's just that downstream part. I'm worried about sort of where my business partners may impact me, but it's also you are in it from an upstream and downstream piece, right? So you could be sort of in the middle of the chain there, and noticing what's in your supplier side as well as who you're providing things is definitely one of those interesting conundrums of what do we do about ransomware or our targeting of us as an industry.
Right.
All right.
So looking at the poll, yeah, 10%. So that means 2.4 of you don't have anything, or you don't know if you have any protections in ransomware. We should talk. Everyone else has, or maybe multi-selected, hopefully, strong IT OT boundaries, 60%. That's good.
That's good. Yep.
Good. Could be better. 40% of you could be looking at how to implement the Purdue model, really strengthen that delineation, right? Start pushing back on your IT leadership or your executive leadership on reducing those boundaries just so you can get effective metrics up. Like that, that no longer is a good enough reason for efficiency because of the risk that is presented by not having strong boundaries.
Yep.
My position there, at least. Good response and monitoring and threat detection. I mean, I see those things kind of going hand in hand, right? If you're doing monitoring and threat detection and you see something, you should have good incident response. So this is interesting that people are looking for threats, they're monitoring for them, but people seem weak or not confident on their OT specific incident
Yeah.
response capabilities. That's interesting. And then 70% is robust backups. I mean, this is a traditional thing when you look at the NIST model, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Predominant amount of organizations have put their money and resources into identify upfront, but mostly, a little bit of response and mostly recovery, right? Everyone's kind of trained to really focus on DR and BC. That's great. But still doesn't seem like I would expect then it'd be 100%, right?
Yep.
Why does 30% of the organization not have robust backups? Like, are you that confident in your ability to stay online with what you have today?
I think also, I mean, we didn't ask it. I think we maybe implied it with the term robust, right? But when was the last time those backups were tested?
Right.
There are a lot of situations where I roll into, especially on the OT side, where we're doing a recovery and it's DCS set points from the 1990s, and somebody may have changed that process. I know it sounds remarkable, but the fact that somebody may have like moved a network asset from one part of the plant to another 10 years ago, never documented it.
It happens, right?
Right. And if you were to reset your network from those backups that you found in the 90s, I don't know if that's really going to work out for you. And so a lot of that testing thing may be important as well.
The other component that I've seen around backups is, storing backups locally on the backup system, not having separated backup systems or completely siloed ones. I've been seeing a lot of stories and hearing about attackers focusing on going after the backup systems, because that way they can almost try to ensure that when the ransomware takes place, that's not your out anymore, right? So we need to stop thinking, and I think the reason that that's been happening is because people are still minimizing how smart and how motivated attackers are in doing this. People have to realize this is a business to them. They have HR, they have payroll. These people go on vacation. All right. This is a business. This is no longer some kid in his mom's basement knocking around doing stuff. These people are highly motivated because there is a return on investment for them to do this. So enough motivation, resources, and time, any attacker will make headway. So resting on the laurels of, oh, the backup is just here, they won't go after that because it's the backup system, just doesn't fly anymore. We need to start thinking about protecting what we're trying to protect, right?
Absolutely. And I ran into that fairly recently. We do a lot of technical assessments, and in one of them, they did a really good job of having the backups. But the backups was natted from the plant environment to the corporate environment. And the operators presumed that their corporate environment was clean because they were told so, right? The corporate IT department said, hey, we are great at cybersecurity. We catch everything. You can put whatever you want on our side, and you don't need to worry about putting a firewall between us because we are protecting you. And that's just not the case anymore. We put a lot of efficiencies of putting communication lines between the plant and corporate environments, but in doing so, we sort of ignore the cybersecurity threats that have now evolved to take advantage of that. And so I think it's really interesting that you sort of highlighted that, because I just ran into that recently of just, oh yeah, no, I just take the corporate backups and I bring them over to the plant, just nat it from one to another. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's going to be a bad day. That's going to be a really, really bad day. And so understanding that, I think, is a key part of that.
Very true. Very true. I think a lot of people just kind of assume somebody else is doing it for them, right? Or they've been told and they're not verifying. Moving things as far left in your process and when you're establishing new capabilities to include cyber, it's going to cost you less to do, and it's going to be easier to do. Take the time to think about it, implement it, get an opinion, get some resources in there so that you don't have to, live with the consequences of not being prepared early on. That example you just talked about, the operators literally could have just figured out, okay, well, if we do use that, how do we implement the right protections and capabilities so that if it is over there, we're still okay? Maybe the IT department can go fend for themselves, fine, but My responsibility is to make sure that this floor is still operating. So,
Right.
good stuff.
Absolutely.
Let's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was agreeing with you. This is one of the things. This is why I get up in the morning, right?
Yeah.
It's protecting these systems and making sure that they're up and operational. And it's no one's. It really is from a cultural perspective, no one's fault from that. How do we get here thing. I think what's interesting now is knowing where we are and how to change it. I think one of the things that you said earlier in the morning that sort of got me was this idea of cyber risk and where's the ownership of that. And when you just mentioned like, well, we may outsource this to vendors. Well, do you outsource your safety risk to vendors, right? You can't blame your vendor for a safety thing that happens at your plant floor. Same thing with cybersecurity. We now need to own that internally because now it can impact the rest of these processes.
Exactly. From a corporate or enterprise standpoint or any company, it rests at the top. If your board isn't talking about it, if your CEO isn't able to articulate or be able to drive the narrative around what your posture is, or somebody high up, and you're just looking at Bob in engineering or Bob, Sally, who's a network administrator, or you're purely looking at your CIO or your IT director to handle and manage all of that risk, you're not doing right by the company. It is an operational risk. It is a business risk. It is no longer an IT risk. Honestly, it never was, but somehow we're having to like pull it out of the depths of IT and bring it into the enterprise risk view. And that goes for small businesses too. If you're a small business owner in a shop of 15 running a CNC shop, all your guys and girls are going to be looking at you if that happens and go, well, what did you do to make this not happen? And how are we going to get out of this? They're not looking at each other with responsibility. It ultimately rests with the business owner and the leadership. So, and it's as easy as having a conversation about what are we doing today? Where are our gaps? And what do we need to do so that this isn't an issue and we can address them? So Berardino, you're back. We want to talk about
I'm going to jump in. We want to open it up to the audience for questions. So you can go into the questions tab, type in your questions. We'll feed them into Brian and Jason. This is a great conversation, so I don't want to interrupt it, but I also want to give our audience a chance to jump in.
Definitely.
I do want to ask you guys a question, and I'll put it out to probably Brian to start, but Jason, I want to hear your thoughts too. 75% of the U.S. manufacturing, roughly 160,000 manufacturers have less than 20 employees, right? So a common question we hear from them, because they may or may not have an IT department, they may or may not have an OT department, that person may also be their salesperson, right? It's like they tend to multitask, right? Just reality. So where do you suggest they start to understand their current state? And then what are kind of the low-hanging fruit that they should focus on when they're doing that?
I think for smaller organizations that size, you start with what you're doing kind of more on your IT side, more of your corporate side, because that's mostly your front door to the world, to your customers, to clients, to whomever. And the first thing I do as a CISO or with any client is I do a risk assessment on what do we have, and I like to do it against open standards that are recognized. NIST puts out a great one with CSF, the cybersecurity framework. NERC CIP is a little bit more in depth, but again, it's a recognized framework. I would go off of a recognized standard of sorts to figure that out. What do I look like against best practices? What's the lay of the land? Start there, because if you just jump into, oh, I was told to get antivirus, I need to implement that, I'm good. Was that your top risk to address? Like, you don't know. So like, it's like going on any journey. Like, bust out the map, right, or Waze, and plug in where you go, and you're going to figure out where to go, but it's based on certain criteria. Determining what you need to do is that same way. So start with a risk assessment on yourself. Like I said, NIST has great ones that are fully available to you. There's other ones that are out there like that. Critical security controls are great. Start with that, determine what you're doing, and then once you're looking at your prioritized gap, like analysis, start addressing them top down, or whatever makes the most probable, but start putting a plan together to start addressing those risks. And it might be AV because you don't have it. It might be number one, who knows? But unless you know it's your number one risk to address first, and it's, why would you put the resources towards it? So that's been my thing for especially small businesses, like very small, under 50, figure out what you got to do first.
Yeah, don't just start spending money for the sake of spending money. As much as any of my CISO friends would hate to hear me say that, you've got to be planful about it. And one of the ways that I think I've found to be most impactful in doing the risk assessment, just to start off, Because sometimes people get scared about, it's an assessment and is it going to evaluate what I do for my job or any of that. You got to go in there sort of even keel. But what I typically do is I go to the operators and I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what does a really bad day look like for you? Like what would be that really just no good, downright rotten day? You'll be lucky if you can, survive it from a stress factor. And most engineers can point to the actual device inside the plant floor that says that if that thing goes, like I'm having a really bad time. And that can start assessing, okay, well, how could that thing fail? Okay, well then how can we prevent that thing from failing? And then you can start building out those controls that Brian was talking about. And I absolutely agree. Picking up any standard works, right? I often have people ask me, because I do a lot of standard development work in ICS security. Well, should I pick up ISA? Should I look at NERC SIP? Pick any of them will be a great starting point. Standards are great until they're not. And they're not going to be great when you're like dealing with compliance and you're down the road of like arguing what a term or phrase is with an auditor. If you're just starting out, pick up any of them and they'll all have, the DNA is like 70 to 80% the same across all of those standards. Just the terminology and how they're audited are different for regulatory purposes, which don't worry about that. Just start. Right. You'll be good.
Just start is great advice, and don't just spend money to spend money. I love that part too, because they're small manufacturers. We have our first question from the audience. As a reminder, you can, if you don't want to type them in, you can use the raise hand feature and then we'll call on you. And you'll just have to put your mic live and we'll take the question. Okay, I'm going to butcher your name. I am so sorry. Piotr Urbansik, maybe? Again, apologize ahead of time. With a name like mine, I get it mangled a lot, so I understand and I apologize ahead of time. What would you recommend regarding the ransomware that also exfiltrates data? Have you ever encountered it in the OT environment?
I've never encountered it in OT. I've seen it in IT. And like the Maze ransomware group is notorious for this, where they'll basically ransomware you and then shame you if you don't pay. And there's a separate cost to not get shamed. So again, it's like it's a twofer on, is there honor among thieves? Do you pay the ransomware and you get the decryption key back, and or do you pay to not make it onto their website? So that's always an interesting one. But no, I haven't seen it in OT as far as exfiltrating. I don't think that's not their MO. And that's the only organization that I've been really tracking or watching that kind of has that as its method. So, Jason?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that it's because of where the value of the data sits, right? So the value of the data, there may be some proprietary processes in your manufacturing environment that you may want to be able to keep secure, and therefore that would give you a knee jerk. But that's probably not where they're going to see the big bang for the dollar, as it were. Because again, to Brian's point earlier, with ransomware in particular, we're talking about something that's profitable. And so when we think about that, because what I don't want people to do is start saying, okay, I need to do encryption across my entire OT department and make sure I'm locking down, from this data perspective. Because the data inside OT, while there are some important aspects to it, the most important piece that we worry about in OT operations is the data available? Is it actually the right data? Not so much has somebody locked that data down, or do I need to keep that data secret? And we use that a lot, for example, in OT detection. The fact that those things sort of have very insecure protocols, but they're all open and they're talking to each other, allows you, if you're detecting things in the OT environment, to be more responsive, because you can start seeing abnormalities. And when you see abnormalities, you can then prevent these things from happening before you really have that bad day.
Yeah.
So as we wait for more questions coming in, one thing we're hearing is the cloud's becoming more and more prevalent, right? And everybody says, go to the cloud, it'll solve all your problems. It's definitely there in the IT world, but we're also starting to see the OT side where they're no longer on-prem storing data. Is the cloud solving all these problems for people? My service provider gives me an encrypted environment. It's an encrypted path to the data. What does it help, and maybe where it doesn't help?
Yeah. Actually, I want to go back real quick to the standards thing. One point to keep in mind: all standards are great. Definitely select one, but on that, select one and see it all the way through before you start adopting another one. The worst thing that you can do is start juggling or dealing with 2 or 3 standards, and then you're like in the mix and you don't know. See one all the way through. Use that. Once you realize you don't, once you realize you don't like it, then adopt something else. But for cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. You're transferring risk to somebody else, like insurance. except you're technically transferring the risk to somebody who actually has to perform all the functions versus underneath a policy kind of recovery type of a piece as insurance works. My view has always been you can't just completely relinquish all responsibility once it's in the cloud. You have to actually know, and speaking of standards, Cloud Security Alliance has a great set of standards on exactly how to do this between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, who's responsible for what. And if you don't know, I get to use my whiteboard, if you don't know as a provider here, and this is the cloud, that there is a different level of responsibility based on each technology, your provider is responsible for this and you're here and here, you need to know that you're still responsible to do all of the controls and the work inside of this. If you're getting infrastructure, you're probably maybe just responsible for here, but you still need to know that, and you still need to do something about it. It's no longer just, oh, the cloud is doing all of this, Amazon has it, I don't have to worry about anything. That's not how this works.
Yeah, I would dovetail off of that, because the cloud conversation we're having today reminds me of the sort of TCP/IP conversations we were having 20 years ago, where people saying in certain environments, no, I'll never see it. It'll never be in here. We'll never have the communication go back out to corporate. It'll just stay inside the plant. And that obviously didn't hold true, right? We did that. And so the security sort of people who said, we'll never do this thing, well, they not only did the thing, but because you were the sort of person always saying no, they didn't invite you to the party on how to secure it. So we had to backtrack and figure out how to secure it afterwards. Same thing with cloud. I wouldn't say no to cloud. I would do exactly what Brian said. I would say, well, where are our responsibilities as an organization for it? Because there are some things that cloud will do better. Just even thinking about if you're using on-prem, but you're not really good at backups, or you're not doing good for access control or monitoring, then maybe there's cloud providers out there who they already do that, right? That's part of like what they do in their data center. They may do more than you possibly can. But understanding where that risk transfer is, just as Brian said, what are they responsible for and what are you responsible for? It's not just I sign on the dotted line and I therefore have no more responsibilities for cybersecurity. It's not how it works.
So a reminder to everyone, you can type questions in the chat box, or in the questions box, excuse me, or you can raise your hand and ask them directly. There's a question that we collected ahead of time from some participants. So they're saying they have written procedures for all their manufacturing systems and they have backups of all their data. Practically speaking, what would be the impact of a ransomware event to them, because they feel that they're not really at risk?
Just downtime. Just to start, there's going to be downtime no matter what, right? So that's where I said the exercising. It shouldn't surprise anybody, but when I see people say that they have robust backups and they haven't tested those backups, how would they possibly know? And I've seen it many, many times where there's sort of this false sense of security around having these backups and being able to recover a system very quickly. I think that Brian hit it really good when talking about the NIST cybersecurity framework. We do a lot of good focusing on business continuity, disaster recovery, and we should. We need to understand how those hooks in cybersecurity play back and forth. But if we don't test those capabilities, if we're not training like it's game day, then we won't necessarily understand what those impacts look like. And so I think that the testing piece is probably the biggest thing for anybody to say, I won't be impacted. Now, let's say you do test and you are rapid fire, you're able to get a plant up in operation again within a matter of hours or maybe a couple of days. There's still going to be the question of, do you trust that system ever again? Somebody was able to get into the system, right? So they were able to violate your boundaries, violate your access controls, manipulate maybe an operator, whatever it was, they were able to do an impact. And do you know that you actually got rid of them? So how much sort of analysis do you have to do to be able to say, well, this bad thing really did happen. Could it happen to me again? We have some operators out there who are still operating in a degraded state because they were compromised and they can't go back to full automation like they had before. And so I think that's part of the understanding of these long lasting impacts from ransomware particularly.
Yeah, I agree on they got in somehow, right? So did it come in through the IT, right? Did it come in through a vendor? Did it come in through a contractor? Now you need to really start doing an assessment of what it is that allowed for that to happen, and then figure out, is it still there? I mean, attackers are notorious for setting up beachheads and laterally moving and then lying in wait. Are they just biding their time and taking, a little bit of a break while you get back to normal so that they can just pounce again? you need to kind of look across your environment to figure out, yeah, how did they get in? Where am I weak? No one ever wants to be in a post breach scenario and just say, yep, we're good. We're back to how we were before this happened. We can just operate as if it is. No one ever wants to go through that again. And you need to really look at yourself to figure out, yeah, how did it happen? What can we do so that this doesn't happen to us again in the same way? Otherwise, you're just going to repeat the same thing and you just got to deal with it.
So Mudra asks a question. The backup solutions FTC recommends are offline and offsite backups, but are these practical? We've heard similar comments about, like, where you say about testing your backups in an OT environment, you can't take the factory down, right? So you maybe elaborate a little bit about what are the best practices around backups from the OT side of the house?
Sure. So just really quickly, yes, having on-site and off-site, they serve different needs, right? So on-site could be something that is network attached. It doesn't have to be, full operating system images. It could just be what's the most sensitive data that I really need for that backup. It could be files. It could be project files in particular that you'd then be able to use. But because they're on-site, one of the comments that Brian made earlier, that could be part of the impact, right? If they're network attached storage, well, they're attached to that network that now I can't access. So having the offsite data is somewhere else, right? And so we may sell it as a cold site somewhere that we maybe have to drive to. Some people do this already for business continuity, disaster recovery for non-cybersecurity events, right? So being able to get their data somewhere else. And that will be older data, but it at least lets you know that there's a known good state of that older data, whether it be months or maybe even a year or longer, that you can then bring back to the plant to get it back up in operation. For testing, it's again, crown jewels, right? So think about what are the things that are really, really important. And those are the things that you probably want to do as sampling of the backup data to be able to understand that. And if you're lucky, maybe you can do during a maintenance event, some sort of exercise where you could test that out more fully. You're absolutely right. I don't want anybody to bring down operations just to say, oh, our backups work. No. Wait till maintenance comes in. Maybe you have a maintenance week or something like that where they have to go through and repair some equipment. Use that as a good opportunity to do some testing, incident response, things of that nature.
I've seen and I've implemented things like this in the DoD within classified spaces between classification boundaries. There are analog solutions to this. And I think the adoption of going back to and looking at some things in an analog way in a fully now digital realm might be the solution to do this, where if you put in some type of analog switch or diode or one-way capability, which you can do, for this, you could maintain on-site backups that are network connected, that are basically black boxes to the network and untouchable. It requires some different types of thinking. We can't just keep going to, like NAS is great, but NAS has its downfalls because it's completely online all the time. And thinking about these problems differently to start addressing them based on the changing nature of the threats and how they've been evolving, we need to evolve with them as well. Jason outlined the yearly kind of construct of and timeline of ransomware as it's matured. And we're still sitting here, and most organizations are sitting here trying to fight as if we are back in the early 2000s with the same type of capabilities. It doesn't work. You need to rise to the occasion. We need to mature our defenses as the attackers are maturing their attacks. Otherwise, just start accepting loss. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to be defeatist, but it's like we have to kind of keep up with it. We can't just be like, oh, this always have worked. Well, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess 3-2-1 still applies, but how you apply it changes over time as the environment changes. So I still remember that from when I first started out in the tech world. One more question from the audience. With Snake ransomware targeting OT, do you predict that the aggressors will become more sophisticated in their attacks?
For sure. I think from the perspective of the skill sets required to impact OT, there's a lot more information, right? I always would cringe when somebody would say, oh, well, they're not focusing on OT. So the attackers need to understand engineering and they need to understand our processes. And frankly, all that does is require time, right? To Brian's point, it's just, it's a conversation of, well, how much learning do they need? And how much of a dedicated attack are we talking about? If it's truly, we're talking about nation states, they're not worried about ransomware, right? They're doing wipers. So it's that wiper conversation, it's the NotPetya conversation, but the impact is the same. We're talking about ransomware. Absolutely. As soon as we start thinking about where that big bang for the buck may be, if somebody can sort of figure out and understand that you losing an operational network could lead to you losing millions of dollars a day, well, how much would the ransom be worth, right? And so it really is sort of this force multiplier conversation about how quickly they want to have it and go from there.
Did we lose the, we still on?
I think this might be curtain call for us.
Oh, okay.
All right, at this juncture, we are gonna wrap it up. Just a quick thank you to all of our panelists, Jason, Brian, and Berardino. Thank you so much for your insight, and thank you to the audience for joining. As a quick reminder, the webinar will be available on MXD's webinar library in the coming days if you'd like to review or share with others. But at this juncture, we will be wrapping up. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jason. It's been great watching you guys interact. We should make it a longer discussion.
Yeah.
Next time I'll make sure I end on a higher note than, hey, they may lock out your entire network for ransom. You got to give a hopeful message, right? We can solve this problem, everybody.
Yeah, we can. It's doable. It just takes time and, focus and energy and the desire to do it,
Yep.
I feel like the desire to address it is the hardest thing to overcome first. Everything else falls in line once you have buy-in, A
small manufacturing friend of mine, he's puts his head in the sand related to these issues. And then when he finally started, turned out there was a lot you can do with not a lot of effort, but it takes that first step. So
yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things where whenever I get asked sort of if I have to spend $1 on cybersecurity, I don't have anything right now, what should I do? It's training. It's just to understand the problem and to have somebody who may have a skill set. After that, then worry about sort of technology deployments and what you want to do next. But if you don't understand the problem, I'm not gonna tell you, hey, you should totally do OT detection, because you can get a whole lot of alerts and be like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. So it's definitely, I think, a education issue and a cultural one that we could probably solve pretty quickly comparatively to everyone having all the technology that they could possibly want to swing a bat at.
Yep. I've never led with technology as the answer to any security problem ever. It comes down the line after we look at people, process, and technology. It's that part after you determine what am I actually dealing with and in what order. Because otherwise, I hate trying to find my way around.
Sorry, but a lot of articles say people are the biggest risk for cyber, but I also feel they're your biggest asset. So it's if you get them on board, it doesn't take much. Jason, like you said, training, get them to understand the process, like Brian said. But that would be that's what we did at MXD when we started beefing up our cybersecurity profile.
Yep. Yeah, I've worked with small organizations where the person who was most passionate about cybersecurity was HR. And so I just put her through a bunch of training, and she now has a career in cybersecurity, right? It was just she was passionate about it and say, okay, cool. Here you go. Here's all the information. And she dove into it, and it was awesome. And I think that's what some people get overwhelmed with, the idea that this is a technology issue and not so much that it's a people and cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
So they're blinking the lights. So I guess it's time to bring the curtain down. I want to thank you guys again for your time, and thank you to all the audience for their participation.
Yeah, this has been great.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the third one.